Good afternoon. So pleased that you're with us today. I'm Hillary McLean with Elsa Strategies. Very honored to be introducing a friend and colleague, Jim Keddy, who is with Youth Forward. He is going to act as our introductory speaker and MC for this press conference, which is, we have a number of illustrious speakers with us who represent organizations that provide critical services for children, childcare, youth services, um, uh, juvenile justice programs, treatment for addiction services, and they represent more than 100 other organizations that share their concerns and their commitment to youth, and their concerns about a bill that's moving through the legislature right now that would cut the tax rate on cannabis and therefore undercut these important services that are serving our youth. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim right now so he can introduce our speakers. Before I do that, I'm going to mention two quick housekeeping things. One, to make sure everyone knows this is being recorded, and also that we will take questions from folks who are with us at the end. So Jim.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Hillary. And thanks to everyone for listening in. As Hillary mentioned, I'm Jim Keddy. I'm the Executive Director at Youth Forward. We're a youth research and policy advocacy organization based here in Sacramento. And we've been involved in work on cannabis tax policy and child and youth services from early on since 2018. I also serve on the Prop 64 Advisory Commission at the Department of Healthcare Services and have worked with other state agencies in informing and participating in their grant process, other agencies that receive funding from state cannabis tax revenues or Prop 64. So we've gathered together today to share with you a letter that we sent to the governor on Tuesday afternoon of this week. This letter was signed by 116 child and youth organizations and tribal organizations, urging the governor to oppose a proposal sponsored by the cannabis industry pending legislation at the state capitol that would reduce the cannabis tax rate. And the reason for our opposition is that state cannabis tax revenue is a significant funding source in California for child and youth services, for environmental restoration, as well as for local enforcement action against the illegal market. We have been part of these conversations around cannabis tax policy for quite some time now. Back in 2022, the cannabis industry was successful in winning a significant tax cut that year when the legislature and the governor chose to eliminate the cultivation tax, which was one of two taxes approved by voters in Prop 64. The remaining tax that we have on cannabis is the cannabis excise tax. And as Hillary mentioned, the industry is now pursuing a reduction in that tax. We want to lift up that we are in a especially difficult time in California, all of us who serve children and families, due to the cutbacks from the federal government led by the Trump administration. We're seeing cutbacks in food stamps, cutbacks on the way to Medi-Cal. There've certainly been many attempts to cut significant federal funding sources for after-school programs, the AmeriCorps program. All the actions of the federal government are hitting us and the families we serve hard. And our concern with this looming reduction in child and youth funding is that this is once again kind of piling on, having an even harder impact on children and families, particularly immigrant families. We have appreciated Governor Newsom's opposition to the Trump cutbacks to child and youth services, and we urge him to continue to oppose cutbacks by refusing to provide the cannabis industry with the tax cut they are pursuing. Just a couple numbers here. We estimate that if, in fact, the cannabis industry wins its tax cut, it will result in a reduction of $180 million each year in funding, $180 million. That's about $900 million over a 5-year period. We would see a reduction annually of $81 million for childcare. Of the funding that goes to child and youth services from state cannabis tax revenue, the vast majority of that does go to childcare, 75%. We would also see a significant reduction for youth services, particularly prevention, substance use prevention services. And then we would see also reductions in funding for environmental programs and for local law enforcement actions. So just to kind of share with you about some of the amazing work that's happening in California as a result of state cannabis tax revenue and why we're concerned about this, why we're sending this message to the governor. We're going to have some of our folks leading work on the ground in the state share with you kind of the benefits we're seeing from cannabis tax revenue and our concerns. So our first speaker is Mary Ignatius from Parent Voices, and I'll ask Mary to share more about herself and talk about our concerns around affordable childcare. And Mary, you are mute. There you go.
Saw it. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jim. It's really an honor to be on this path with you. I'm Mary Ignatius. I'm the Executive Director of Parent Voices. We're a grassroots organization of parents where we center their wisdom and expertise to transform childcare and other systems that are impacting them to be more just, fair, and inclusive. And for us, access to affordable childcare is the cornerstone of opportunity and equity. When families can access care, parents get the dignity that comes with earning a hard-earned paycheck, or the ability to pursue higher education and complete degrees, and contribute fully to their communities. For kids, brain development is happening at an accelerated rate from birth to 5 years old. And so when they have access to early learning, we're really laying the foundation for lifelong success. We're able to identify early intervention and special needs sooner rather than later. And our early educators are the workforce behind the workforce. Their work makes all other work possible. And that's why we really need a robust childcare system. But despite the positive that it brings, it has been severely underfunded for decades. We have 2 million children who are eligible to receive subsidized childcare in the state, but only 1 in 9 are actually being served. And this brings us to Prop 64 because it actually became the only dedicated funding source for childcare for families who are being served outside of our CalWORKs public assistance program, or outside of Prop 98, which funds a very narrow state preschool program and a traditional kindergarten program now, but it's only for 4-year-olds and it's only part day and part year. So what Prop 64 funds are vouchers and childcare center-based slots outside of those programs. This type of care, it's the most flexible. It meets the needs of today's working families who are working around the clock, nights, weekends, and it's covering children for their entire childhood, not just partially for 1 year. And so that's why we are in this fight alongside the other youth serving organizations, because we have to do everything we can to protect any kind of dedicated funding source because it's so rare in our state. And just a couple of numbers, before Prop 64, in our alternative payment voucher program, we were serving about 30,000 kids. In our general child care program, we were serving about 30,000. Now, over the last 4 or 5 years, and since Prop 64, and since some federal funding has come in, we've increased it by over 400% in the voucher program and nearly 200% in the child care slot, center-based slot program. So that's not all Prop 64 dollars, but that is about how do we sustain what we've grown, and we need to sustain it through the continual collection of these revenues. And it is reliable. So many families, right? Our members call the waiting list the no hope list, because they have been on the childcare waiting list for years. Sometimes their kids are going to kindergarten. Sometimes they're never even getting called off. That's why it's the no hope list. So Prop 64 brings that hope. And next year alone, we're supposed to get $197 million in cannabis taxes, which should help the governor meet his promise. He made a promise back in 2021 to fund 200,000 new slots. He's fallen short about 50,000 slots. So these cannabis dollars could be the down payment to meet that promise. And that's why we're here fighting to protect it all.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary.
Mhm.
As I mentioned earlier, what we anticipate with, if in fact the industry is successful in getting its tax cut, we're anticipating a loss of $180 million in total. That figure comes from the analysis of AB 564. That's the legislation that would reduce cannabis taxes. That the analysis conducted by the Senate staff, the bill analysis. And of that 180 million, we anticipate that the childcare industry, would lose $81 million. So that's a very significant reduction of funding. We're going to move over now to the youth services side of this conversation, and I'm very happy to introduce Paloma Quatenango from the Mid-City Can, a really amazing organization doing work with young people, children and youth in the city of San Diego. And Paloma is going to share with you her experience as an organization with her organization that has received funding from state cannabis tax revenues.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you so much for having me. As Jim mentioned, my name is Paloma and I am the youth organizer with Mid-City Can. We're a local nonprofit that works with youth in the San Diego County. And our age range tends to be high school aged youth who happen to be youth of color from low-income communities that are cannabis impacted zones and zip codes. And these tend to be the San Diego historic communities of color. And our programming at Youth Council really focuses on making a difference in the lives of our youth by creating community and creating impactful change. And I want to share two stories of our youth today that kind of talk about like what the program offers and really like what the impact of doing the tax rollbacks would be. So one of our youth, Tran, is a freshman that joined us this past year and super shy, super nice. And we have weekly programming where we create safe space for our youth, where we let them connect with other peers around San Diego County. And slowly getting to know them. We also, with the funding, have been able to start restorative circles where we really get to hear and connect with the youth and have facilitators know what they're talking about and guide those conversations to create a space of healing. A lot of the topics that did come up were concerns around like immigration. We're a very diverse community here in City Heights. A lot of the zip codes that are impacted by cannabis are communities of colors. We're seeing, food insecurity and different things, and they're able to talk about that and they're able to process those feelings. And as we went throughout the year, we also did field trips for many of our students. This was the first time that we took them. They went camping, right? They're like, I've never been camping before. What do I do? And we provide these at no cost to them. We're like, don't worry, here's a packing list, make sure you bring a sweater and, you change your clothes and we will have everything else for you, sleeping bags, tents. And we took them to Joshua Tree, which we also got to take them to rock climbing. And our youth were like, I cannot believe that I just did that. They're like, I feel like I could do anything now. And I was so nervous and I didn't want to do it. And now I'm here and I feel like I could do anything, even public speaking, which then leads us to following Richard, who is our, freshman, a little bit shy, seeing him connect with his other peers to go into budget hearings. Our youth are focused on a campaign where they're working and taking a look at their community and what is going on in our community and what can we do about it to create that impactful change. And they chose to revitalize their local park here, Officer Jeremy Henwood Memorial Park. And for that, they need money. And so this entire year, they prepared to ask for $2.5 million from city council budgets. They went, and Richard was the first one to say, I want to try it, Miss Paloma. I'm a little bit nervous, but can you practice with me? Yes, we can practice your public comment. He went, gave an amazing comment, talked about how you need to plant a tree and plant the seed now so that you can enjoy the shade of the tree in the future. And as well as was so hyped and so amazed by being able to talk and share his story that he came back to the next meeting the following week and told his peers about it and was like, hey, I know you guys are nervous, but I recommend you do it. It's something that you need to experience. And this is just one of the stories of our students. And of course, they did get the 2.5 million allocated for their campaign because we had a lot of youth going up there and talking about their story. So this past year, we served 140 youth in the San Diego area that came to our programming. We also have summer programming like Artivism that teaches about creative outlets and how art can become a medium to talk about certain issues that are going on within their communities, and just a lot of things that our programming offers. And we cannot do this without the funding that we get, so that this could be a no-cost program for our youth, right? Another story that I wanted to share was from our recent graduate, Tanya. She also gave public comment and she had been participating with us for years now. And in her most recent comment, she said that she was able to get the strength of the community and being with her peers by knowing that she's part of a program that sees her and values her as a whole person. And she also brought her sister in front of council members. And she said, I've been advocating for the last 3 years here with Mid-City Can, standing up as a youth to ask you for money so that we can get a park that our community deserves. And I'm graduating and I still don't see that park. And a lot of the youth in her grade had also been advocating for that. And they got to graduate without seeing the park completed. And she said, I'm bringing my sister in so that she can continue the work that I am doing. And these are just some of the stories that bring in and creating that space for them. A lot of my youth tell me, I come in for the food and I stay for the program. And again, I just want to reiterate, there's a lot of more stories like these where our youth are feeling like they have a space that they can belong in. They have a space where they can create the change that they're looking for. And again, receiving this funding really helps us make sure that we can focus on the youth and building the youth up, then focused about the budget and what can we do with that. So
All right.
I can keep going on. So
Thank you so much, Paloma. Thank you for sharing those stories about the amazing youth development work that you're doing and how you're helping young people engage in positive, constructive activities, learn leadership skills, avoid getting involved in risky behaviors or substance use, and actively contributing to their community with your story about improving the neighborhood park. Very inspiring. Next, I'd like to introduce Albert Molina from the San Fernando Valley Partnership. Albert is a longtime colleague and a very important leader in our substance use prevention work in California.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here with this amazing group of people. And I'll tell you, our work really revolves around community, working with schools. So a lot of our efforts are really helping schools address the unintended consequences of legalization that really is important to understand at the same time is how are we leveraging our youth drug education with advocacy to identify and address the key sources of access. I'll tell you, when we meet with our school sites, they're drowning in terms of the types of substances that are flooding our communities. So a lot of our work leverages that education, the initial education around the true facts around substances that continue to flood our communities. And just to share one particular project that we're working on in terms of its impact on school campuses. And it was interesting for us to realize that folks hadn't really seen it. These were locations that had been hiding in plain sight. And these were smoke shops that were literally steps from schools that were selling a lot of these illicit products. As some folks may have heard, we have Delta-8 and these emerging cannabinoids that were ending up in the hands of young people. But, you know, a lot of the young people also identified other products, nitrous oxide that's being sold, a lot of these other designer substances, 7-OH, that is a kratom derivative that seems to be now flooding our community. So, I'll tell you, prevention is critical, from making sure that young people feel connected to their school and to their community, to being able to learn about the facts around specific substances. Most of our young people are getting their information from social media, from a lot of these other websites that do not provide factual information. So it's critical that we have these programs in our communities, in our schools, that not only provide factual information, but also create these avenues for connection. And I'll tell you, in communities of color, we have young people that don't feel connected. So to have a space, and I think Paloma talked about that, having a space where you belong, having a space where there's a group of young people that are working for change. And I'll tell you, that is critical. We've talked to school administrators. A lot of our efforts really were, hey, Albert, where is this stuff coming from? I've received bags of paraphernalia and products that are confiscated. And their question is, how are young people getting these products? But, more than that is, how do we stop the flow? And the only way we really are going to stop the flow of a lot of these products is to engage young people themselves in identifying the sources of access and developing effective strategies to stop. And I'll tell you, the other side of it is, when young people are identify these key sources, some of them do come from the illicit market, but it's important to understand that a lot of these prevention efforts are actually working to eliminate that illicit market and creating an environment for the regulated market to thrive. So it's important to understand that prevention does change communities, and in the long term will allow the regulated market to thrive. But for us, working with schools, and I'm glad you mentioned restorative circles, Paloma, that's the other side of it. Sometimes when young people get caught up, and just to give you an example, when we look at prevention through even this early intervention through a restorative context, you're not a drug user. You're not labeling a young person as a drug user. They made a mistake. And with a mistake, we can correct mistakes. So then this is really engaging the entire school, leveraging their school culture and climate team to really make sure that what we're developing here involves the entire school campus. The other side of that is really building the capacity of young people to lead, to plan, to organize. So think about what we're really building is future leaders that know how to identify specific issues, how to engage and rally their peers and communities to develop forward-thinking strategies. And I think, Jim, that's why I like your organization, Youth Forward, because these efforts are allowing us to empower young people. And I'll tell you, I don't like to throw the word empowerment around a lot, but when we really are organizing, when we really are building capacity, when we're providing factual information, that is empowerment. When young people then become those agents of change, and that's what this funding has allowed not only our organization, but the countless other organizations that are receiving this funding to transform communities. And I'll tell you, the group here, amazing group of people, but I'll tell you, it is critical to maintain prevention funding to protect our schools, to protect our communities, and to ultimately ensure that the regulated market thrives. And it's community members, it's young people that can identify these other illicit sources of access. So it really is critical. It was young people that had identified these other products. It was young people that had identified a lot of these emerging cannabinoids, Delta 8, Delta 10, and saying, hey, what are you all doing about it? Young people have identified a lot of these counterfeit products that their peers are purchasing at locations that shouldn't even be selling. So prevention is critical for education, early intervention, but also to develop these forward-thinking strategies with schools that keep young people in school. We can't continue to push kids out of school. And oftentimes when we're not developing these forward-thinking approaches, we inadvertently push young people out of school. So building their capacity to address the issues in and around their communities, looking at communities as schools, looking at their schools as communities in and of themselves has also made a big difference. So I think for us, it's allowed us to create partnerships with schools, but ultimately build the capacity of young people that are going to go on and change the world. I've been fortunate to have been in prevention for a long time. So we have alumni that have gone on to become lawyers, teachers. And I'll tell you, prevention really does change not only the trajectory of young people, but even impacts the communities. And it is critical to maintain this funding for prevention and even early intervention, but also to really create these safe community environments. And that really is the focus of our work, is to really create safe and community environments, enhance these connections. The other side of, kind of youth mobilization, capacity building, is to strengthen those connections with caring adults on their school campuses. So for us, this funding is critical in terms of just saving, and I'll tell you this, and I know Donna had met Don, one of our panelists as well, is, our communities do have a trauma problem, and a lot of our effort does work to counter that. So we really are fortunate to have this funding, but it really is creating changes. And it's important to understand that these funds are creating change and really addressing some of the unintended consequences of legalization, but also addressing the impact of a lot of these locations that shouldn't be selling products that shouldn't even be sold. So part of this is really making sure that we're ensuring that our communities are safe, that our young people have spaces where they can grow and thrive. And I just want to, thank you all for inviting me to participate. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Albert. Thanks for all the work you do. I want to lift up that when we talk about state cannabis tax revenues funding substance use prevention, we're talking about all substances, not just cannabis. So as Albert was mentioning, the great work he's been doing around smoke shops and some of the products that are coming out of smoke shops, intoxicating hemp products, kratom, all kinds of stuff being put at our kids right now, and how critical prevention is. If we're urging the governor to oppose the tax cut, if the tax cut goes through, we will see a loss of $540 million over the next 5 years for the kind of work that Albert does and the kind of work that Paloma described. So I'd like to pass it on now over to Amy. And Amy is one of many folks working here in the Native community of California, providing leadership. Prop 64 has become a significant funding stream for tribal nations and tribal organizations. And I'll have you go ahead and introduce yourself, Amy. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I'm grateful to be here and honored to be speaking amongst so many amazing practitioners and people working in prevention in California. Like Jim said, my name is Amy Matheson. I am the Youth Leadership Development Program Director here at Two Feathers. We are located in Humboldt County, California. Each year, Two Feathers and our leadership program employs and mentors an average of about 50 Native American youth. These are young people who are facing some of the most complex challenges in our communities: substance use, mental health struggles, disrupted family relationships, and a lot more. Some of you might know Humboldt County is a rural community with a long history in the marijuana industry. And while that industry has brought economic benefit, it has also created challenges in our community, especially for our young people and our Native American communities. Marijuana use is prevalent here, it's normalized, and our young people are using marijuana at very young ages. We believe that prevention is not just a health issue, it's also social justice work. And Native American youth in Humboldt County have the highest rates of adverse childhood experiences. This makes them 4 to 12 times more likely to develop substance use disorders and or attempt suicide. Our program directly addresses this crisis. With the funding that we receive, youth gain access to healthy adult mentors. They're able to reconnect with their culture, engage in their community in positive ways, and discover empowerment that comes from achieving their goals. Because of these experiences, we see our young people choosing not to use substances, accessing mental health care, increasing their sense of self-worth, and choosing to pursue career opportunities that help others and give back to their communities. Here at Two Feathers, we believe that this program and this funding it's a lifeline. When Native American youth experience healing, they don't just change their own lives, it creates a ripple effect in our communities that strengthens their families, their friends, the communities around them for generations. This funding is having positive impacts for generations to come. And I think we should really be thinking about it, not just in the here and now, but for our future. And a reduction in funding would mean fewer youth reached right now, fewer lives changed, and fewer future leaders for our communities. I truly believe that we cannot afford to turn our backs on our young people. And I really appreciate you all giving me a platform and the time to speak to you and share, how this funding is helping our community. And thank you for standing with our Native youth. And I hope that we ensure that this vital work continues. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy. I want to mention that there's also a funding stream for environmental repair of lands damaged by cannabis grows. And there are many rural tribes that for decades have suffered from illegal cannabis grows on tribal land. And the Department of Fish and Wildlife is in the process of making grants to some of those tribes to do environmental repair on their land. So while tribal organizations and tribal nations are heavily engaged in work with young people, they're also working to repair the damage to their lands caused by illegal cannabis grows, which is kind of a topic for a whole nother webinar, but I did want to lift that up. And then for our last speaker, we're going to Don Carney, also a prevention leader in the Bay Area. And Don, I'll ask you to please tell everybody a little more about yourself and about the great work you do. And Don, you are on mute.
All right. So our job is to, are you getting an echo on your end?
Yeah, it might be from your phone, Don. If you have your phone, if you're connected to the Zoom on phone also.
Let me see here. I gotta get rid of an echo. Can you help me with this?
But you can
How
go
about
ahead. That goes not too bad. Go ahead.
Okay. So what we do here at Youth Transforming Justice is we divert kids from the probation world. And here in Marin County, we have some of the highest drug use of young people across the country. Marin County is an interesting place, a lot of wealth and a lot of poverty. I've been working with the most impacted school system in Marin, Centerville City Schools, predominantly Latino. And with 3 years of this funding, we were able to close probation referrals from this community. In fact, probation has gone north to Novato, the second largest community impacted, and are willing to give us another employee to do the same work up in Novato. So this work not only saves kids' lives and families, it saves the system a ton of money by keeping kids out of probation. We also divert kids from suspension at school because that's part of the link to the school to prison pipeline. So we have a lot of contacts with schools, and we help young people in schools that are struggling, and we give them support. We teach them about how to deal with their triggers because of trauma and how to be resilient around handling themselves in tough situations that end them up in police custody. So our program with this funding in 3 years, I said, has closed a huge gap in kids from our community being referred to probation, so much so that we're moving on to the next community with probation's financial support. But we can't do that without the support we're receiving from the Cannabis Fund. And one thing I have to say is, if kids are hanging out with adults who are helping them find their own agency, they're amazing. We had an illegal shop open in downtown San Rafael, and the kids self-organized a picket line. And these are middle school children, not even high school children, middle school children, calling for this place to be shut down, calling for their own well-being. And it was a beautiful sight to see that these kids had that experience of being able to shut down a business that was polluting their peers with poison. So I really think it's not a financially wise decision to pump up the profits of the cannabis industry at the cost of the children in our most impacted communities.
Great. Thank you so much, Don, and congratulations on all of your great work to divert young people away from probation and onto a different path. That's amazing. I want to just kind of repeat Don's point here that what we're urging the governor to do is to take the side of children, youth, and prevention, and to not take the side of a recreational drug industry that is simply seeking to have greater profitability. For us, it seems like a pretty clear choice. We asked the governor to consider that choice. As I mentioned earlier, we sent the governor a letter on Tuesday afternoon, signed by 160 child and youth serving organizations and tribal leaders. Over the next 5 years, if the cannabis industry tax cut goes through, we will see the loss of $900 million that funds this kind of amazing work. So that's our message. That's why we all came together today. I'm going to turn this back over to Hillary and see if we have any questions that from folks who are attending. As Hillary mentioned at the beginning, we're also posting this online. So for folks who weren't able to join us, you'll be able to hear from our speakers and learn kind of more about our point of view through an online portal.